Hello there, Grateful Gang. It's Lauren Blanchard-Zaleski here. Welcome to Gratefully Living the Chronic Life. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I welcome you. I come live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And the mission of this show is really to help people who struggle to find gratitude, hope, kindness, compassion, basically the tools that we all need to help us get through the struggles of life. We do have a focus a bit on people with chronic conditions, physical and emotional, but I found that each topic we talk about each week usually pertains to just about everybody. So welcome to our broadcast. I have an amazing guest tonight who I am so excited about. If you're a member of my Facebook group, it's Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain. There's the banner I made that cuts off my head. You can find us on Facebook. If you're a member of the group, you know how excited I am about this guest because I've been gushing about him for several weeks now, as well as putting his poems in the group. He's actually a personal friend of Michelle Wiegers, who was on with us a few weeks ago. James was the one who introduced us. So you are in for a big treat tonight with James Cruz, the poet, and we have not had a poet on the show before, and I'm excited to talk about healing and poetry, and he's just wonderful. So so thank you for being here, and for those of you that are not watching live and you're watching the rebroadcast, welcome to you as well. We air live on YouTube and Facebook Live and in the group. Speaking of the group, if you're watching from inside the group Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain, make sure you hit, you grant StreamYard permission when you log in. If you want to comment or pose a question, if you don't do that because we're a closed group, your name is going to come up as Facebook user. And we've got a prize tonight. James has kindly agreed to autograph a copy of his book. So I'm going to keep putting this out here throughout the broadcast because I will forget. To win the free autograph copy of his book, you need to type #gratitude. Now, in the past, I have said, oops, what did I just do? Hang on. In the past, I have said you can do something like #gratitude, but not tonight because my producer, aka my niece, hang on, what am I doing here? She is not here with us. So I am counting on StreamYard is going to be doing, oh my, I like totally zoomed into my screen. I can't, hang on, let me see. I can see like part of me. I don't know what I did. I was just telling, oh my, I was just telling James I usually screw something up, but this one's a doozy. I can't even see. I wonder if I now that's a first. I've never done that before. I'm glad I was able to come back. So I don't know what I did, but that's okay. I hear when you screw things up that badly, it's good luck. Not really. Let's say hi to a few people. Let me get rid of this banner first. I don't know what I did. That was crazy. I saw like I was zoomed in like crazy and I saw the top corner of my head. Okay. Oh, we've got James, you're on here with us. I didn't get a chance to properly introduce you. Welcome everybody to James Cruz, who has kindly agreed to be here with us. Welcome, James. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Let me read James's bio, if I can find it. I had this all queued up too. This is insane. Okay. James, is it okay if I read the bio from in your book?
Sure, yeah. Let's do
Look on
that.
a Google
I can just
Doc.
tell people too.
What's that?
I can just tell people too.
James Kruse is the author of 3 collections of poetry. His poems have appeared in Ploughshares, The New Republic, and The Christian Century. Kruse holds an MFA from the University of Wisconsin and a PhD in writing and literature from the University of Nebraska. He teaches poetry at the University of Albany and lives with his husband on an organic farm in Shaftsbury, Vermont, which sounds very heavenly up there. Thank you for being here with us. James just wrote a book, How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. This is the book that we are giving away. Make sure you do #gratitude. So James, I was telling you before we got on the air, I do not remember exactly how I found your book. We are thinking, as we were discussing, it may have been through a network for grateful living. We had Christy Nelson on with us, and I know you share the same publisher. But as soon as I saw the words, well, first of all, poetry, but also gratitude and hope, that is what the group and the broadcast is all about. So I have so many things I want to ask you, but how did this book come about?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have thought that the book was put together in response to the pandemic because it came out, about a year after. And in part it was, I started it during the pandemic. And then, what really happened was I just felt like there was this lack of both gratitude and hope in our culture, joy especially too. And it didn't really dawn on me until my husband and I were traveling in Argentina, just like, a month or two before the pandemic really started. And when you're taken out of our culture and kind of dropped to a new culture, you start to notice the things that are here and are not there. And I just felt so much gratefulness, so much hope, so much joy from the people around me. And so it wasn't a very healthy thing, but I was on vacation and started working and started putting together this book. My husband, of course, thought I was crazy because he was just out walking in the sunshine all day. I took plenty of walks too, but I just felt like something took me over actually, and something really wanted this book to be born. And it was actually while we were in Argentina that I proposed the book to my publisher, Story Publishing, who also published Christy Nelson's Wake Up Grateful. And they seemed really interested, which surprised me because they don't usually do poetry. And
oh, really?
Yeah. They don't usually do poetry. It's really hard to get a poetry anthology published, actually, because you have to get permissions for all the poems from the different poets and different publishers. But I was shocked, but they ended up giving it a chance and really supporting it. And so, we made this book happen. And then even at the last minute, again, I can't explain it, but I came across a poem by someone you may have heard of, Amanda Gorman. And
Maybe.
And I just thought, like, I need a poem by her in this book. I need this poem. And I didn't know why. I felt a strong need. And I think her presence in the book and her presence on the inaugural stage really helped bring poetry to the forefront as well.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. I know so many people were speaking about her and also poetry after the inauguration. I mean, she's just so impressive. I was mentioning to James, for those of you that don't know, I'm in the midst of writing a book, a gratitude journal for teen boys that'll be out in November. And it's 120 days broken down with gratitude, and they want quotes by people who teen boys can relate to. So I've got a quote of hers in the book. She is very impressive. But yeah, it is great. And I believe Maya Angelou, years ago, was it the Clinton inauguration, that she really got poetry buzzing back then as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they said yes. And then what's the process of? You have to ask permission, so they don't actually write the poems for the book, or do they?
Most people did not.
Okay.
I asked a few poets for work specifically, like my old mentor, Ted Kooser. He sent a bunch of poems, and there are 3 by him in the book. He's a former US poet laureate and writes some of the most like mindful, grateful poetry I've ever come across. Him, Jane Hirschfield, a few others, but mostly I'm a hunter-gatherer of poetry because I've been teaching poetry for so long. And I teach a lot of private workshops to young people, older people, all kinds of different ages. And so I always try to find poems. Really, there's no other way to say it, but poems that really speak to the heart, that just get you a little deeper. And poems that really capture everyday life and just, everyday moments in a sort of new way, because I like poetry that isn't abstract and that's not too heady. That stuff can be good too, but I like poetry that brings me back to the moment, back to my body, just really grounds me with sensory details and sight, sound, taste, smell, all of it. And you can pack a lot into the small space of a poem. So I looked for poems like that for this book, and hopefully I succeeded in finding those.
You absolutely did, and your description right now was perfect. Each one of these poems. Did you say there's 100 poems in the book?
100,
Yes,
yeah.
100 poems in the book, and each one of them, it's like a warm blanket, is how I would describe it. I was telling James, we were discussing before we went on the air, that it's nice because a lot of poetry can be a little bit dark. So it's nice to have a book, kind of like Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain is for Facebook groups. This book, you will open a page and feel comfort, and looking at gratitude and everyday things in a new way. Like you said, there's so many of these poems, as you can tell, I like a whole lot of them, really have you thinking about things in a whole new way. I love that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And it's true. I mean, I really, if a poem didn't uplift me or bring me that sense of joy, then I just knew I didn't want to include it, because this needed to be a really safe space for people, especially after, the year that we've all had and we've all endured together. And,
Right.
just so much of the pain and grief and all of that. I just wanted to create an uplifting space for people to go. And someone wrote to me recently, actually, on Instagram, and she said that she had been having nightmares lately, and she's been keeping this book on her nightstand. And it's just like, I mean, I started crying because it was such a representation of what I was trying to do with this book. I mean, I would never have imagined someone doing that, but the fact that she felt that this was that safe space for her just means a lot to me.
That is beautiful. It makes me want to cry hearing about it too. But it just goes to show how powerful words are. A paragraph, a sentence can make the difference for somebody who's having nightmares or somebody who's in chronic pain. That comfort, words, they can tear you down, but they can also build you up and change everything. So these words are very, very powerful. And if it does that for her, I'm sure that it helps many, many people.
Yeah.
I have so many questions I want to ask you. I know the hour is going to go quickly, especially since I can't seem to keep myself on the air here, but let's say hi to some people. Facebook user. Okay. Hi, Facebook user. Make sure if you haven't already, make sure you log out and log back in so we know who you are, especially if you're going to enter the contest, which is #gratitude. If you want to enter a free signed copy of this book, #gratitude. Hi, Pamela. Thanks for being here. Hello, Steaton. We got a lot of #gratitudes here. Okay. Hello, Grateful Tears. Hey, Sarah. Mary's here. Hello. Heidi's here. Hi, Heidi. Karen. So excited to hear these poems firsthand and from the author. You guys know that I've been posting several of these. I do a good night post every night in the group, and I've posted several. I've been dating them too, so I know which ones I've I've put on what dates. I'm a geek, but I embrace my geekiness.
That's important.
Sandy Montgomery, thank you for doing that, Sandy. I'm glad that you're here. Karen's here. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here, everybody. We love having you here. Please feel free if you have any questions for James at all on the book about poetry. I wanted to talk to you about, well, you've got this book, like I said, Poems of Gratitude and Hope, and your previous book, this one is called Healing the Divide, Poems of Kindness and Connection. So right there, your words, kindness, connection, gratitude, and hope are like, they sum up what my group is about. So, and this was only put out in 2019, yes?
Yeah, right.
So you've been busy.
I've been busy, yeah. And I just have felt a really strong sense of responsibility. I mean, poetry is my lens and kind of the way I see the world. It's also my creative outlet. And so gathering these poems together and putting out these books with these themes that are things that I'm aspiring to, as I say in the intro to How to Love the World, my husband called me on my lack of gratitude one morning. And, he asked me that question, are you happy to be alive? And, it really just stopped me and, made me pause and like, yes, I am grateful for the coffee. I'm grateful for the pounding headache I had that day. And, just trying to embrace it all, the pleasure and the pain at the same time. And so, yeah, I have felt a strong sense of mission with these books. And I think I just want to go back to what you said, Lauren, about the power of words and, reading words that are powerful and curated like this can be really helpful. And I think, I know that you encourage people to write and to journal, and I'm a big believer in that too. I journal, almost every day that I can. I do the morning pages that Julia Cameron recommends in The Artist's Way, like 2 to 3 handwritten pages every day that you can. I don't like to be too rigid about anything because then you start beating yourself up about it.
Good point.
Yeah, but I think it's, once you get into the kind of routine of doing that and, realize that it is kind of a self-care practice, actually, just journaling, these things just start happening in your life. You realize that there's power in getting what's in you, in your head and your body out onto the page, making it more, visible, tangible, so that it doesn't have as much power over you anymore. And,
absolutely.
And then you get to create this thing that didn't exist before, even if it's just a journal entry, that is creativity, and that is a creation. And it's just something to celebrate. So some days that are really difficult, I'm happy if I can just make it to the page and write a page or two.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that about writing it down, and it does take away its power. It can when we verbalize things as well. But I actually just read some study yesterday that I think came from the Greater Good Science Center about venting, complaining, when you should do it, when it's not healthy. I mentioned to you that we offer these 2 live chats twice a week for people to vent, but in general, our page is a positive place. But I also don't think we should keep our feelings in. And the article talked about journaling and the power of journaling. Do your poems ever stem from your journals? I was going to ask you, how do you come up with your ideas and where do they come from?
Yeah, oftentimes they do stem from the journaling. And I think even someone who's been practicing writing for, decades can still feel that fear of facing the blank page. And so the practice of sitting down, low stakes, like, oh, I'm just going to write a few sentences, or I'm just going to write a journal entry, or I'm just going to bitterly complain for the next page and a half. What's really bothering me? There's something about facing that blank page with very low pressure that I think makes it easier for something to just kind of stem from the journal entry, like you said, Lauren. And then sometimes like I'll step away from that, have to do something, get ready for work or do whatever. But later in the day, oftentimes after I've taken a walk or done some other kind of self-care, then, the lines will just start going through my head. And I've learned to keep a notebook with me, or if I'm walking around my house, just to come back and try and head straight to the notebook. Don't open the laptop, don't check the phone, just go straight to the writing, and kind of, just take care of that urge that this thing wants to be spoken, and to really listen to that. So that's kind of my process. And then I rewrite things, over and over, not kind of obsessively, but just to get a feel and try to like hold on to the joy and just keep letting it flow through until it feels more right on the page.
That's beautiful. I am amazed at, well, first of all, your work, and I'd like you to share something with us of your works. The more I talk about it, the more people are probably like, come on, let's hear some.
Right.
But I love your process is fascinating. I'm always fascinated by artists and how they go through the process of, embracing their art and how it comes out. You talk, before we read a poem, you talk in the beginning section of the book, which is called The Necessity of Joy. You talk about your husband calling you out and saying, are you happy to be alive today? But you talk about, on page 2, you talk about, during these uncertain and trying times, we tell ourselves that joy is an indulgence we can no longer afford. And we've become all too familiar with the despair filling the airways and crowding our social media feeds, leading to what psychologists now call empathy or compassion fatigue, whereby we grow numb and disconnected from the suffering of others. Boy, that hit me in the gut. True. And so sad, but very true, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's what, with the group, we try to foster connection. So many of us, when we get sick or injured, we tend to isolate. And I think a lot of people did during the pandemic, whether they lived in chronic pain too. You were sort of forced to, in a way, but that isolation can be so dangerous. I know it certainly was for me. And, even if it's just a kind word on Facebook or something, that connection with people is just so important. And, you talk about that in your Healing the Divide book, the importance of connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually going to be the subject of the next book as well.
Is it? Tell us.
It's another one on kindness. So it's called The Path to Kindness, Poems of Connection and Joy. Because I kind of wanted to get joy more in that title. Lauren, I think you're right. When we're sick or when we're injured, and also I think when we're feeling especially anxious or in despair, like there's that drive to isolate, like that feeling that you're the only one, or
Yes.
Even like, especially during the pandemic, even now still, perhaps for a lot of people, there's a large feeling of helplessness. Like, what I do or what I say isn't going to matter, especially in the face of, all this bad news and all this negativity that's going on out there. But I was reading a scientific study or listening to a podcast, I can't remember which, but they were talking about how they did this study where they had people basically first thing in the morning or first thing when they came to work, they wrote, I don't know, like 3 to 5 emails or texts to people thanking them for something specific. And like that just made people so much happier throughout the day. And you're looking like, yeah, I already know this. I'm not surprised.
No, I don't. I'm smiling because I love it.
Yeah. You don't seem surprised though. And it makes sense, right? That, starting off your day or your work day with gratefulness is going to make it so much better. And, I've tried to do that, like, starting off with those positive things. And you're right. It could just be a few kind words on Facebook about, someone's accomplishment, or, shooting someone a message like, hey, I saw you did blah, blah, blah. Congratulations. It just changes your whole vibration. And, I think it opens you up to the rest of the world. And and so that's what I try to do with poetry. And when the pandemic first hit last year, I started. I am not a tech person, by the way. I had never posted a video.
I am. You can tell I am.
We're in good company. I had never posted a video on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. I didn't even know how to do it on my phone. That's how crazy I am. But I felt this strong urge last year, like people were really struggling and in despair. And so I decided that for Poetry Month, which is during April, I would record myself reading and talking a little bit about a poem every single day for that month. And it ended up going much longer too. But a lot of them were the poems that are in How to Love the World. And it felt like such a necessity to share words of comfort and hope and gratitude at a time when we were all really struggling to inhabit that space together.
Totally agree. The joy aspect, we have so much in common, it turns out, but I've called this year 2021 the year of joy in our group. And I think the first episode of the year I did a broadcast on the difference between happiness and joy, which I didn't really know that there was one, but it's kind of like the difference between gratitude and gratefulness. It's like this mind-blowing thing, semantics perhaps, but interesting to dive deeper into it. All right, I have so many things I want to ask you, but we need to hear a poem of yours. Is there anything you want to read for us first?
Let's see. Yeah. Maybe I'll read.
So, this is James Cruz, who's with us if you're joining us late. He has written and edited How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. And if you'd like to win an autographed copy, you need to do this exact and make sure your spelling is right. #gratitude. If it's not exact, the software won't pick it up. So #gratitude. Okay.
Yeah. So I think I'll read Down to Earth, which is on page 44. And this one was written for my husband, who's a farmer. And watching him interact with the natural world has made me more connected and more grateful for nature and the world around us. So this is Down to Earth. The heart of a farmer is made of muscle and clay that aches for return to earth. And when the sky releases a steady rain, massaging each row of sprouted beans, my husband leans out of the car window and opens his hand to hold that water for a single instant, his heart now beating in sync with rain, seeping through layers to kiss the roots of every plant alive on this living, breathing planet, on whose back we were granted permission to live for a limited time. Beautiful. Yeah.
That's one of the many things that's so beautiful about this book, and that was a piece of James, but every poem is kind of like that looking at each minute detail, things you would never think about. Even when we're digging deep into gratitude, we can come up with things like clean drinking water and fresh air. But the things in this book, you don't necessarily come up with, and it is such a breath of fresh air. So it's, again, How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope.
Well, thanks for pointing that out too, Lauren. It's the thing I love about poetry is that it kind of pushes you to get really specific about what you're describing. And I love poems that recreate the moment that they're inhabiting, so that the reader, even I can drop back into that moment and remember driving along the road with, my husband, Brad, sticking his hand out the window and just feeling the rain. And it's so vivid to me. And it makes me think about, I don't know if you've heard this either, Lauren, but I often tell my writing students that, a lot of them keep gratitude journals or, write about things they're grateful for as part of their journaling process. But what science has found is actually if you come up with, one or two new things that you're grateful for each day, that changes everything, because it's very easy to say, well, I'm grateful for my home, for clean drinking water, like you said, and that's important, but it's also the little things that are around us. And I think that that's the other thing that I really love about this book and reading this book is that it just takes me back to those really little things, just the small stuff that makes me feel more connected to my everyday world.
It does make you feel connected to the everyday world. You're right. And so many different aspects too. Michelle Wiegers, our friend, has some poems in, does she have a poem in this book? I know she does in Healing the Divide. She does.
Mm-hmm.
Such talented poets. How did you get started writing poetry? Did you start from a young age?
Yeah, I did actually. I had this amazing teacher in third grade actually who she had us memorizing poems and reciting them every week. Very simple poems like Shel Silverstein,
Yeah.
things like that. And I just enjoyed it so much. And I don't know, I was always a really shy kid. I really did not like even raising my hand or getting up in front of the class. But one day I just got brave enough to go up to her desk and I asked her if I could write my own poem and recite it for show and tell. Like, how did I even think of that? I have no idea where that came from. It's one of those like, maybe it was just fate. Like it just pushed me into this. And so I started doing this for several weeks, and the response from other people in the class, like I thought I would feel embarrassed. I thought that they would think I was silly or, whatever, make fun of me. But people complimented me and people were like, wow, that was great, even though it was pretty simple. And it made me realize, I think, the power of words, which, is what we kind of started talking about, that you could write something, say it out loud, and people would respond to it. I mean, and it was something that didn't exist before and something that came directly out of me. Yeah, so that was how it really got started. And then just slowly, I was lucky enough to have teachers who were really supportive and encouraged me. I didn't really take it seriously until I got to college, and I lucked into some poetry workshops with my mentor, David Kluhl, who basically just showed me that poetry was still being written. It was being written by many other people besides just the dead white guys that we were studying in school. There were living, breathing men, women, queer people, trans people, all these people writing poems from different countries, different backgrounds. And it was just like waking up to this feast that I had no idea existed. And so
love that.
Yeah. And he had us creating our anthologies of our own while we were in class with him. So my father had passed away when I was in college at a very young age. And, it was very difficult for me to even continue going to college. But these poetry classes helped me. And I ended up creating an anthology of poems about grief and loss. And just like, there's this Buddhist story that this woman came to the Buddha and basically asked, for some relief from her grief, asked to be cured. And he promised her, I'm probably getting the story wrong, but he promised her that he would cure her grief if she could go to all the houses around in the town and all the neighboring towns and bring back a mustard seed from a house that had not experienced some sort of loss. And so, of course, she went around to all these different houses and she realized that all of them had experienced the loss and pain of grief. And so she came back empty-handed, but she told the Buddha, I am cured of the worst of my grief because I realize that I'm not alone. And, that was what finding all of these poems about grief and loss helped me to realize. And it also pointed out to me that I could write about this and I could actually feel better. One of my mentors is Naomi Shihab Nye, a poet I just adore, and who's an amazing human being. And she says always, like, it's very rare that someone says, I wrote something down and I didn't feel any better. It's like you almost always feel better if you write it down, if you get it out of you. And so I think poetry can really provide us just like these little glimpses, these little bite-sized portions that can maybe give us a little bit of a way to let go of some of what we're holding on to.
I love that little bite-sized nuggets of goodness. I was going to ask you, and you kind of answered it for me already, but how do you feel that poetry, the art of poetry, is unique from, regular writing? What gears you towards, poetry versus writing, say, short stories or something like that?
Yeah, I've written a little bit of everything. I've never written a novel, but I've written nonfiction, short stories, and there's just something like some special charge that poetry gives me. I can't quite explain it, but I think it's that poetry, it usually has a smaller space, so the language is really charged. It's very condensed. And I think because a poem is something that can be experienced in just a moment or two, you sit down with it, you take it in, and it can change you. And I'm just fascinated by an art form that is seemingly so small. It's made of the everyday language of, just that we use in our lives. And yet it can have this very healing power over us. It can have the opposite, like you said earlier too. Words can cut us down and they can harm us. And the other side of that is that they can be truly healing too. And so I've just been really interested in that and really drawn to the art of poetry for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you just talking about that, I really never thought about this before, but because you have such limited space, I would assume your word selection, you talk about the power of words, you have to really get your point across in a limited space. That's really beautiful and difficult.
Yeah, you kind of, even though it can be about ordinary moments, you can't really beat around the bush too much in poetry. You have to kind of get straight to, and usually poems do that. Oftentimes they'll begin in a more descriptive place or, just with an observation. And then if you follow them, they can lead you more deeply into your own experience, memories. In the midst of writing a poem, I've unearthed things that I had totally forgotten or, completely pushed down and often moments of pain. And yet I'm still grateful for, bringing them to the surface and bringing them into the light and air, because I do believe that bringing things to the surface when it's safe to do so, in a safe place with safe people, that is one of the most healing things we can do. And certainly, it feels very safe to do so when it's just me and the page, or me in a poem. And I, just the other day, I was writing a poem about, really, truly about the power of words and how much I loved being read to or, reading picture books and things like that when I was a kid. And somehow in the midst of writing that, this memory popped up of a time in my family's life when we were homeless and we had to go and live with relatives and, had to be on government aid, food stamps and things. And I just remembered my mother telling me, it's kind of this moment of shame that I put away, not to tell anyone at school what had happened or not to use those words. And, it is a sad moment to come back to. And yet I think when we bring those moments back along with the moments of joy that we're experiencing throughout our lives, then we become more integrated and we become more whole. And, I think that is what any sort of creativity can do for us. It gives us access to those reserves, those places that, we're not generally in touch with throughout our regular days because we're busy paying bills, worrying, cooking dinner, taking out the trash, doing the things that have to be done.
Right, because why would you be just ordinarily sitting around digging deep, into past things? That's the healing aspect of poems, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think it speaks to the power of having a practice, whether it's journaling practice or whatever you want to call it, some sort of creative practice that allows you to get into what I think of as a deeper spiritual space. That I'm operating from a different place when I'm being creative or when I'm writing from my intuition. I believe that we're, in touch with our spirits or whatever you want to call that. And when you're in touch with that place inside of you, those things that you put away just or pushed away or were kind of pushed down in you, they're allowed to rise to the surface again. And it can just feel like such a relief.
And then the shame is released, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And like I said, too, it can happen even with joy, because in our society, we are conditioned not to feel joy or to feel this like upswelling of joy, which I do think is deeper than happiness, like you were saying. Laura. It is different. We feel this upswelling of joy, and then if you're anything like me, you start worrying or you start getting afraid of something, or the mind latches onto something else. And so I've tried to make it part of my practice, whether I'm journaling or writing a poem or whatever, to just create one of those moments of joy and just stay with it and just see what happens, and be with that kind of, it's a little bit of an uneasy feeling if you're not used to it. And so, it brings up the sorrow and it brings up the joy too.
Right. And we can have a really great day and one bad thing happens and we're going to ruminate on that one bad thing, right? We talk a lot about that with gratitude journaling and how the power of those words can really help to kind of rewire your brain to think, in the positive, because we are wired to think in the negative, apparently.
Yeah.
Karen is thanking you for your poem. And Pamela can really relate to suppressed thoughts being released when the right brain is being activated through writing.
Absolutely, Pamela.
For sure. One thing I love, another thing I love so much about this book is, coming from somebody that lives with chronic pain and illness, a lot of times looking at a large piece of writing for many of us is very daunting. Depending on what our issues are, it can be, our brain maybe not be able to process large, pieces of writing or in very small packages. This is beauty in very small packages right here. It's just gorgeous. Let's read another poem from here. Do you have anything special you want to read from?
Yeah, sure.
Great.
Let me see here.
Because I have so many marked down. Well, we could be here for 5 hours.
Why don't I read one by Naomi Shihab Nye, since I mentioned her.
Great.
And this one is called Over the Weather. So I love that as being the opposite of Under the Weather.
Okay.
Over the weather. We forget about the spaciousness above the clouds, but it's up there. The sun's up there too. When words we hear don't fit the day, when we worry what we did or didn't do, what if we close our eyes, say any word we love, and any word we love that makes us feel calm, slip it into the atmosphere and rise. Creamy miles of quiet, giant swoop of blue.
Love that. Those words. The words. Every poem in here is just, one word is better than the next. And you just glide with them. I don't even know how else to describe it, but gliding through these poems, it's just so beautiful. I also love, as typical with poetry books too, you can kind of skip around, look in the index, look for something that catches your eye, maybe something you need to read on that particular day.
Yeah, and some people have told me they make a little game of it and just, open it to wherever. And odds are, whatever you open it to may speak to something that you're feeling or that you've
Right.
been dealing with on that particular day. And maybe not, it is also, I love putting these books together because it's a little bit like curating a museum exhibit. And, not every single piece or not every single painting in an exhibit is going to speak to you on that deeper level. But you might come back to it on another day and find like, oh, wow, this is even more relevant than the first time.
Right. Or reading the same poem on different days can be
Yeah,
totally different meanings too, right?
absolutely.
Linda says, beautiful. You, back to the healing part. In the beginning of the book, you talk about writing poetry has been your personal source of delight, an antidote to the depression that can spring out of nowhere. I love that.
Yeah.
I now carve out what I call soul time for myself each day, making space for silence and reflection, even if it is just 5 or 10 minutes, even if I have to wake up a little earlier to do it. Soul time. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels so much slower, and feels so much more calm to think of it as soul time, because I think that we as a society move so quickly, we move so fast. And I think a lot of people felt that during the pandemic when we just had no choice but to slow down. I know I thought I was a slow mover already, and then I really had to slow down. And I thought, wow, I still have a lot of work to do. Because I was caught up in the fast pace of life and the busyness as well. And so the soul time piece is just basically time for oneself. It's self-care practice, whatever you want to call it. And I do feel that that's healing. I also feel that it is a way of keeping depression at bay. There were many days during the pandemic when I didn't feel like I did much of anything, or I didn't feel like I accomplished much of anything. And yet I could still sit down and write in my notebook. I could capture whatever I was feeling. Or if it was, if I noticed this moment of beauty in the living room with the sun shining in, hitting the carpet a certain way, I could just write that down. It's something to be grateful for. And it didn't cure my depression or, my anxiety, but it did help. It did help.
You know what? Any little piece that helps, right? And I think, with the pandemic, I think I've heard from people, and I can speak from personal experience too, if you're in a dark place, a lot of times your place got even darker during the pandemic. But I also feel, and it sounds like you may be in agreement with me on this, that a lot of beauty came out of the pandemic as well. Of course, not the death, that was horrific. But for me, at least, kind of looking at things through a new lens, like with gratitude, seeing what's really important in life, having to slow down. Being somebody with chronic illness, I wasn't exactly running around like a lunatic to begin with, but slowing down in different ways, being unable to see a lot of people who you love, maybe for me at least, my appreciation for my family grew, and I couldn't hug my parents for a year or whatever. So there were beautiful moments interspersed within that, really difficult time that we're now thankfully coming out of.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's that, that maybe deprivation piece that allows us to appreciate, coming out of it on the other side, what we didn't have or what was missing. And so I'm always trying to stay in touch with that. And I think, a lot of the poems in this book, and really in The Healing the Divide and How to Love the World, they hold that sorrow and joy at the same time. I am often saying that and talking about that, or, poems that are joyful but also have a shadow in them. And I think the shadow is that our time on the earth is limited, and it is really, our lives are very uncertain now. I know a lot of folks are feeling very shaky about coming out of the pandemic.
Right.
Like, is this real? Can we trust this? And I feel some of that too. So we have to reach out and look for whatever we can to hold on to that, because I think it helps us notice the joy, the appreciation, the gratitude and hope even more when we are in touch with our own mortality, as long as we don't ruminate or dwell on it too much.
Most definitely. I don't think, for me at least, it's the moments of pain and sorrow, misery, despair that also boost my gratitude. If everything was just on an even keel all the time, it would be difficult to really, grasp for that big inspiration. But, I've had some really dark moments in my life, like most people. And it sure makes me even more grateful for the times that aren't, or even, the joyous moments, of course, but even the times where things are just on an even keel, I'm grateful for those too, because it could be, it could be a lot worse. So yeah, there are beautiful moments that came out of the pandemic, sorrowful, but good as well. We have a lot of talented writers in our group. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's because, they join a group on gratitude that they're used to kind of delving inside themselves. I'm not sure, but we have quite a few, and one in particular who has been writing poetry and posting it in the group each day, and she's quite talented. How would you recommend people who are, looking to get into poetry or writing? How would you recommend what avenues should they go through? How do they get practice?
Yeah, I think, joining some sort of maybe writing specific group can be really useful, as long as it feels like one that's really supportive. I went the academic route, and that worked for me. I don't think it works for everyone, because, after graduating, I ended up having to just kind of forget a lot of what was taught to me, and realize that the kind of writer I am is someone who wants to reach everyday real people. Like, I don't just want to write for academics.
Right.
So finding a good writing group, and you can find those usually through libraries or local art centers. You could create your own too, and that's even more possible online now. I know a lot of folks who have done that. There are some really good journals out there. So just beginning to send work out, and just kind of befriending other writers as much as you can, taking online webinars, classes, just getting into those groups where other people are doing some of the similar things that you're doing. And if you're into poetry, definitely, I write more poetry when I'm reading a lot of poetry. And I'm not just trying to say that to make you buy more poetry, but it's just the way it is. And it just inspires me. And so I think, whatever you want to write or create, then you just invite more of that into your own life. I think that's a good way to go. And just keep making those connections, because connections with other writers that I've made over the years and that I continue to make have just given me so much joy, and have made this life possible, and these books possible too. A lot of these people are friends or acquaintances, people I know through my various networks. So, and also just sticking with it, believing in yourself, trusting in your voice, even if you have those necessary fears and doubts around your creativity. Everything you create is there for a reason, and trusting that drive is really important.
That's wonderful advice. I know myself in writing this book that I'm writing, I've, in the beginning especially, had quite a bit of imposter syndrome. Like, I've been writing for a very long time, and then, you're actually supposed to do it, for somebody else. And it's like, whoa, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not a writer. So that self-doubt is very real, at least for me, it is.
Mm-hmm.
You were mentioning webinars. I'm a little thrown off base tonight because of my technological difficulties, but you are doing a class right now called Poetry of Resilience. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Sure. Yeah. So the class has already started, but anybody can join at any time because all the classes are recorded. And it's with Danusha Lamaris, who is a wonderful poet. Guest poets like Naomi Shihab Nye, Jane Hirschfield, Ellen Bass, Dorianne Lux, Ross Gay, Nicole Brown, wonderful people. And so we just talk really a lot of poetry. We share a lot of poetry, but we're talking the creative life essentially. And so it's thepoetryofresilience.com if anybody wants to find out more info.
That link seems to be broken, the poetryofresilience.com, but there's like a / summer session that does work. So I'm going to put this in the comments for you guys, but I will also post it afterwards. Hopefully this works. This link will take you there. It sounds wonderful. Poetry and resilience. I mean, that's what we're all about, is trying to be resilient, in the face of pain. And when I say pain, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual pain is pain,
Absolutely.
And it affects all of us in very different ways, but it can be very, very debilitating. Mm-hmm. Guys, we have a couple more minutes before our drawing. So to be entered to get a free signed copy of James' wonderful book, please do. Where is it? #gratitude. There it is. #gratitude. #gratitude will supposedly, allegedly, be picked up and you'll be entered into a drawing to win this wonderful book called How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. And I mentioned this, we didn't get to really any of it, but this is an equally wonderful book called Healing the Divide, Poems of Kindness and Connection. And your next book, you said, is going to be on kindness and joy. Yes. Mm-hmm. Have you always written positive, uplifting things? I know you talked about your dad and grief.
Yeah, no, I haven't only written positive, uplifting. It is more of a focus for me now. And actually that became that way because it just ended up being a challenge. I find it's a lot easier to write about the dark and the difficult. It seems to be where my mind often goes. And so it just became this challenge for myself to write more uplifting things. And I'm always trying to bring more kindness, gratitude, hope, joy, connection, all of that into my life. And, a lot of people might think, like, I do think of myself as a pretty kind person, and it is something I have to work at. I get angry at people too. I get frustrated. I lose it all the time. And so it is a practice like anything else. And I find that the more I read about it, the more I surround myself with books, poems that talk about it, I just start noticing it in my life. And I start noticing it when people are kind to me, and holding on to that a little bit more, like the joy we were talking about. And then I start noticing openings when I can be kind to others, when I might offer something or, just do something that will help them a little bit.
And it serves twofold as far as the healing goes too, because when we offer those kind words to somebody, it, like we already mentioned, it can really make their day. It can make their, week, month just wonderful, a kind word, but it also makes us feel good as well, especially if they respond so well to it. So it's, these words if they're used properly, can really serve to be so healing. And your words certainly do, James. I wish we had more time to read more of your poems, but I highly encourage you guys to read the book called How to Love the World, Poems of Gratitude and Hope. Let me quickly show, let's see if I can do this, James' website. You can visit James on jamescruise.net. And you do writing consulting as well, I see. Yes.
Yeah.
Great. And he has that's our Facebook page. You can join Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain. Excuse me. Didn't mean to show that now, but this is my husband and I got him a gratitude shirt for Father's Day.
Good.
I meant to show that at the beginning of the episode, but he's a grateful dude.
I love it.
Where'd it go? I had your Facebook page up here. Here it is. Cruise Poet, facebook.com/Cruise Poet. So without further ado, let's see if this drawing actually works. So let's try this here. Here it is. Okay, so supposedly this program, anybody that put in #gratitude is going to be entered in this. Let's see. Oh, look at this. Check it out. And the winner is... Vicki Blackburn. Congratulations, Vicki. Yay. So I will, I'm sending the book to James for him to sign, and then we will get that out in the mail to you. I'll private message you to get your address. Congratulations. That worked pretty cool.
Yeah.
I have to tell my 14-year-old niece is my producer. I'll have to tell her that I won't need her services anymore. No, I would never do that. James, it has been such a pleasure having you on. I wish we could have read more of your beautiful words. But you can find this on Amazon, you guys, both books on Amazon. Visit his website at jamescruise.net. You will not be sorry. His words are deeply powerful, meaningful, beautiful, and full of lots of gratitude. So James, thank you so much for being here with us tonight.
Thank you, Lauren. And thanks to everyone who's watching.
So nice meeting you. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you next week. We have, oh no, we won't see you next week. I meant to say this in the beginning of the episode as well. I am taking off next week because my last book submission is Friday. So I'm going to just allow myself that time, but we'll be back the following week. Dr. Bruce Singer will be back with us on Thursday, the 8th or 9th. I forget what it is. So thank you for being here, everybody. Peace and love. Take care. Bye, James. Thank you.
Thank you.